that. We're talking about regulations. We received a very nice email from Paul who says, you guys want to live in a safe world, right? You want to be protected from this, that, and the other? Government regulations are there to help us. And we've invited Tim Sandifer from the Pacific Legal Foundation to help us talk about regulations and economic freedom, et cetera, et cetera. And Tim, your description of the fact that the free market is absolutely imperfect, but it's the best choice. It reminds me of Churchill's quote that democracy is the worst form of government except every other that's ever been tried. But then I was checking that to make sure I got it more or less right, and I came across one of his other quotes that I like, I think, even more. The greatest argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter. But that's an aside. So we're talking regulations, economic freedom.
I'd like to restate one of Tim's points, just in case you're just tuning in.
Okay.
The argument is not, and this is the way people always portray it, it's not against having any regulations or regulations or not.
Right.
It's, do we need, well, we don't need as many, but do they all need to be the government? Why can't they be private? That's the argument, not eliminating them all, correct?
That's exactly right. And the reason to prefer private market alternatives is kind of what Churchill says. The reason Churchill says democracy is better than any other form of government is because democracy empowers the citizen more than any other form of government. Not very well, but better than any other form of government. And the private free market regulatory scheme empowers consumers in a way that government regulation does not. So Consumer Reports tells me whether this product is a good product or not, and I can decide for myself. But when the Consumer Product Safety Commission makes it illegal to sell that product, or the FDA withdraws a crucial pain relief medication from the market, I don't get any choice at all. Shouldn't I have the choice of whether to take the risk or not? No, the government's going to protect me from my own bad decisions. I think that's a really bad idea.
Well, it's like the drop-side cribs that they banned because 3 kids in 10 years have died.
Yeah, please. Let's take some calls. I'm going to move kind of swiftly, and we hope to open up some lines. I would like to hear from entrepreneurs, business owners in California. What's the stupidest or most conflicting regulation you have to deal with? Or how difficult is it to open a restaurant in Berkeley, for instance? 1-866-331-TALK, 1-866-331-8255. We're going to keep Tim on the line, zoom through some calls. It's Ray in Sacto up first. Hey, Ray, what's on your mind, bud?
Well, my argument against the overt regulation of the type that we're facing is that it punishes or penalizes people a priori for a crime or a mistake they might make or might commit.
If you're going to start dropping Latin onto me, I'm just going to have to go somewhere else.
I'm sorry?
That means before it happens, right?
Okay.
Yeah. In other words, the logical outcome of this is that you put everybody in jail because they might commit murder, they might commit an armed robbery, and you end up with a totalitarian dictatorship if you carry this to its logical conclusion, which usually happens.
Well, I would say, yeah, except for, there are no examples where it didn't in history, I don't think. All right, thanks, Ray. Your comment, Tim?
Yeah, no, that is actually a brilliant point to make, and one that I wish I had remembered, and that is
plagiarize it. We do every day.
Government regulations impose hidden costs on us all. We never know what the real cost of a government regulation is, because most regulations, what they do is they stifle entrepreneurship. They stifle new developments and innovation. We don't know what might have happened if this regulation weren't in place. So we don't know what the cost of regulations are. Whereas if the free market is engaged and people have the freedom of choice, and Consumer Reports tells people, well, this new product is probably not a good idea, and some people take the risk anyway, and it turns out it's a brilliant idea, they enjoy the rewards of their wise decision, and I suffer the cost of my poor decision, and that's how decisions get made. But when government comes in and says, here's our one-size-fits-all rule that regulates, the federal government regulates how thick ketchup should be. The example of lasagna was given by the person who wrote the email. The government regulates what you can call a pizza. If you don't put enough tomato sauce in the sauce, you're not allowed to call it a pizza. These kinds of regulations deny me the freedom of choice that allows a free market, to be dynamic and innovative and create new ideas.
Denying me the choice for less saucy pizza?
Yeah, I know what that does to you.
Yeah, because I like less sauce.
It's
I've got a sensitive stomach.
What is the name? Martin in San Francisco. Hello, Martin.
Hey, Jack and Joe. Love your show.
Thank you. Very kind of you.
Anyway, look, I agree. Overregulation is definitely can stymie business. I'm a small business owner. However, you get rid of the health department. The public can't go back into the kitchen in the restaurant and look and see that everything's clean and safe. You allow a guy to open a a stand right in front of a restaurant selling food, you're going to kill the restaurant. Nobody wants that. I mean, the restaurant owner's paying way more taxes. He's supporting the government. You got a bunch of stands in front of a restaurant. That's ridiculous.
All right. We're moving kind of swiftly there, Martin. You brought up, I think, two good but separate topics.
What if it turns out what the public wants is roadside food in carts? If that's what we want out of our eating establishments, and that's the way it turns out, so be it.
Well, what he's saying, though, is they don't bring in nearly the property taxes. But I suppose you have to factor that into who you patronize, right? All right, so, Martin, thank you for the thoughts. Tim, two separate questions. One, rats in the kitchen. Two, trailers out front of the restaurant.
He's absolutely right that there are sensible regulations, and particularly in food safety, because then the consumer, if you kill the consumer, he can't sue you afterwards. And so
I'll keep that in mind.
It's sensible to have regulations.
What about my neighbors?
In situations like that, it's sensible to have pre-use regulations in place that prevent harm. Yeah, absolutely. The problem is that they're so easily abused, and we have to keep a strong eye on these agencies. So I'm not saying that all regulations necessarily fail. I'm just saying that most of them do.
Okay.
And as far as push carts, he says they would drive the restaurants out of business, and nobody wants that. Well, if nobody wanted that, nobody would buy from the push carts. So, in fact, if the push carts succeed and the restaurants fail, that's because everybody wanted that.
Right. So it turns out society prefers push cart food. Well, then that's the society we're going to craft. Right. Why would we keep it another way out of just illegal reasons?
Because the guys on the city council who are buddies with the restaurant owners want that world. That's not right. Okay, real quickly, I know we're running kind of late, but I want to get to this one because it brings
you don't have much faith in your food if you think you're going to be run out of business by push cart food.
I guess. I want to talk about this one because we've discussed this with you before, Tim. The insidious choking effect of permitting and licensing by government. It's John in Sacto. Hey, John.
Hi there.
Hi. Go ahead. Tell us your tale as briefly as you can.
Okay. I'm a certified financial planner. I provide free notary services for my clients. I've been doing it for 20 years. Every 5 years, you have to go down and take a test. Now you have to go to school in order to take the test. So they're forcing us now to pay to go to a school to learn what we need to know to pass the test.
What, to take a thumbprint and watch somebody sign a piece of paper?
Right, exactly. Well, there's a lot of like real estate fraud and things like that. I mean, you have to know the rules. Mm-hmm. But, for the last 20 years, I've been studying the rules out of a book.
All right. Yep, fair enough. Comments, Tim?
Oh, tell me about it. I'm a member of this California State Bar. I know exactly what he's talking about. These kinds of regulations that impose heavier and heavier educational costs, everybody says, oh, well, that protects the consumer more. Well, yeah, okay, maybe it does, but at some point the consumer should be able to choose who he's going to hire and not have to hire some person who's had so much education that he charges $1,000 an hour, right? It's a trade-off. You can't have a perfect system. You have to have a trade-off, and regulations deny us the ability to trade off. So now just before we go, I want to remind people that I discussed this more thoroughly on the Pacific Legal Foundation's blog. You can get there by going to timthelawyer.com, and you'll see where I discuss the economic matters that don't really adjust themselves well to talk radio.
Right. All right, Tim.
I.e. the stupid people.
Tim Safer, the Pacific Legal Foundation. All right. And by the way, we've got a link, of course, at ArmstrongandGettyRadio.com.
Oh, yeah, we always have Tim the Lawyer.
ArmstrongandGettyRadio.com.
Tim the Lawyer is always going to be linked at ArmstrongandGettyRadio.com.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks, Tim. Great. Great as always.
Don't lend themselves to the talk radio format. I hear what you're saying.
Enough said.
Those of you reedy types want to go to his website with your reading and whatnot,
with your verbs and your nouns.
Probably more Latin. I mean, what sense does it make? For instance, on that restaurant conversation, that we're going to deem this is the way we have to feed ourselves in society. They have to be brick and mortar buildings, and they have to be that food comes out of there, and that's the only way you can. Why would you design the world that way? Whatever turns out to
benefit certain people.
Whatever it turns out to be the most the way the most people want it should bubble to the top.
Right.
And if it turns out for whatever reason society likes pushcart food, which I don't think they do, prefer it to restaurants, well, then that's the direction that we should go.
Right. Freedom!